Hello and welcome, friends. I welcome you all for our today's discussion on a very interesting topic, Israel-Hamas war. All of us are talking about this war in terms of civilizational conflict and the war between the Jewish state and the Islamic extremist actors and all. But there are certain other angles to this conflict which is actually haunting the world today and threatening the entire world peace. In fact, people and strategic experts are thinking that this may escalate to an entirely different level. So I guess we need to explore not only the civilizational conflict aspects of this war, but the other factors pertaining to the geostrategic and geoeconomic domains also. And I think that's very important to make an objective analysis of this entire conflict and make sense of what is happening and what is most likely to happen in the future. So today we are joined by Levina. She is a strategic affairs expert with about 10 years of experience in this field, and she contributes to Business World, Chanakya Forum and Resonant News. She is a young entrepreneur and who is known for her very fresh and objective analysis of things. So I welcome Levina. Levina, you're most welcome to our show.
Thank you so much, Avi. Thank you so much for that introduction.
So I'll just start with a few questions. I read your article, Levina, regarding this Ashkelon pipeline, which you wrote in the Business World, and that brings an entirely different perspective to this conflict. I mean, we are all hearing eminent diplomats and strategic experts writing about terrorism, extremism, geopolitical issues, and also quoting, at length from Samuel Huntington's Clash of Civilizations. But is it just it, or there is something more to that? Is it just the conflict of civilizations, or there are other factors? In your article, you brought something very interesting about the economic angle, the pipeline which you mentioned, and I'm sure not many people know about it, not even in the official circles. Would you tell us more about what's there in this? Like, is it just civilizational conflict, or there's something more to that, and why we need to know that?
Right. Let me start from terrorism itself. Terrorists are somebody else's mercenaries. Like Pakistan uses them against India in a guerrilla warfare because they cannot wage a conventional war. So there's always a separate angle existing, and it's almost always money and business, which is the target. Every war is fought to protect, destroy, damage any strategic asset. In this case, I believe it is a pipeline and a separate canal project which is coming up. And there is dominance of corridor involved. If you look at Jerusalem's history, this place has forever faced turmoil. Even in 500 BC, when, let's say, there was no other community attacking Israel, it was the Babylonians. Why? Because this place is part of a corridor which connects Europe to Asia, and it'll always be perpetually in turmoil. So there is business, there's dominance of corridor, and then of course energy sector. Like every other war, there's oil and water involved, and then there is spreading US thin. We all know Israel is US's ally, and US has been spread very thin. I think earlier in January, there was this report by CNN which said US is sending its secret stockpile of ammunition from South Korea and Israel. Now it has prioritized Israel over Ukraine. That gives advantage to Russia. And I saw one of the Israeli serving officers say it on camera in a podcast that they believe this is a Russia proxy war. Well, we'll come to that, but yes, there are many angles involved. Business, definitely, and so is energy.
Thank you very much, Levina. So today we have about 30 minutes, and we are really going to discuss this very interesting and exciting aspect of this conflict. To begin with, I'll just request you to provide us a brief introduction of Eilat Ashkelon pipeline. How is this pipeline a major factor in this?
Even before I tell you about Eilat Ashkelon, I must tell you about its history because it has been in existence since 1960s, and people had completely forgotten about it till 2014 when a major environmental disaster happened in Israel due to a leak in the pipeline. So back in the 1960s, Israel and Iran had great relations. So Iran used to pump its oil from Ashkelon, Eilat, which is towards the bottom of Israel, and pump it to Ashkelon, which is northern part of Israel, right next to Gaza. And
should I share the presentation?
Yes, sure. So
just a moment. I'll share the content. Yeah.
So the lower part of it is Eilat. If you can move to the next slide.
Next slide.
Yeah, this is just about Gulf of Aqaba, and
yeah,
this is the pipeline that I'm talking about. If you see, Eilat is a southernmost tip of Israel, which is to Red Sea. Iran would basically send its ship through Red Sea to Israel, and then they would pump this oil to Ashkelon, which is lying right next to Gaza, and from there on, the ships would take it to Europe. And it was a good business till 1979, when Iranian Revolution happened, and so then Israel and Iran do not, they are belligerent towards each other, and they don't share great relations anymore. So that is a history. Now, right now, after that, I mean, people had completely forgotten about it. Nobody was discussing, but there was a lot of oil still being pumped through that pipe, and the customers were Azerbaijan, Russia, other countries. They would just send their ships to Ashkelon, and from there the oil will be pumped to Eilat, and from Eilat it would be distributed to Asia. And that is when the 2014 accident happened. Again, there was news of this leakage, and it was forgotten again. Then Abraham's Accord happened. Then Israel and UAE decided to sign an agreement where UAE will send its ships to Eilat, and from Eilat again, it will be pumped to Ashkelon. It is distributed to other European countries. And it made perfect sense. Because this is a very short way. The trips do not have to go around Africa or through Suez Canal. And Suez Canal has a limited capacity. So also, I must tell you that, EAPC's capacity is it's a competitor to Suez Canal. So EAPC's capacity is about, storage capacity is about 25 million. And on the other side, Suez Canal can let only 2.5 million barrels per day.
So there's a huge difference.
Huge difference. Also, along this pipeline, Israel also wants to construct a canal which is called Ben Gurion Canal. So it is still, that project hasn't taken off because of all these issues. But if that project comes in, it'll be a major blow to Suez Canal. Suez Canal, we know it's about 150 years old. It is limited by its width and depth, because of which it cannot allow big ships like VLCC. The VLCC is very large crude carriers, which has, this can carry a lot of, oil. From what I remember, it carries about 2 million barrels of petroleum in it, while Suez Canal, because of its limited capacity, can allow only ships called Suezmax, which can carry
smaller in size.
Yes,
smaller.
And they are just half in size. And Suez Canal does about 12% of the world's trade is done through Suez Canal. And if EAPC comes in, it will capture again another 10 to 12% of Suez Canal's business. So 80% of world's business today is done through ships, maritime trade. So if anyone who is able to, capture Suez Canal or give it a competition, they make more money. And another thing about EAPC is Israel can afford to give discounts to countries which will be using Ben Gurion or EAPC. Suez Canal charges about 300,000 to 400,000 per ship. The Ben Gurion Canal is about 100 kilometers long. Suez Canal is 193. So Ben Gurion would be half the size. And then we have the pipeline. It all works in Israel's advantage. So it's if this project comes in, so after 2021, when it had become active again, EAPC was an eyesore for people who are investing in Suez Canal.
Thank you. So one more question. Previously, as you mentioned, that the pipeline has been existing for the last 4-5 decades, right? I mean, it started in 2000, so
1968, it came into existence.
1968. So after that, as you also mentioned in your article, that the ships which were embarked on this port, Ashkelon port, they didn't get the permission to park in the Arab countries, port cities. So how did they manage? I mean, were they trying to fudge identities, or were they going through like different registration processes, changing identities? How did it happen? Or was there a mutual understanding between the Israelis and the Arabs?
Officially, GCC was not allowing any ship which is docked in Ashkelon to use the GCC ports. So these ships would undergo repainting, re-registration, and something like repainting takes a lot of money. Yet, if these shipping companies were able to manage profit, they were not just fudging their identity; they were still making profit out of this, right? I mean, so that proves my point. And this pipeline has remained a secret to hide the identity of these customers of Israel.
And these customers included Iranians, Azerbaijanis, Armenians, and
Turkey, Russia.
Okay, that's an interesting point. So now, my next question is: so as you mentioned that this is going to take away a lot of share from the Egyptians, and Egyptians supposedly have good ties with Israel. So, and there are other actors also involved. I'm sure like Chinese have their own BRI, Qatari interests are also involved in this pipeline project. So how are the different stakeholders gonna get affected? Like the Egyptians, Qataris, Chinese, Gulf countries, and Iran. Can you just tell us a bit more about how are these players going to get affected?
I'll start
and also, sorry, one more question. So if this pipeline goes through, is it going to affect the Egypt-Israel relationship, which, I mean, Egypt is considered as not as a rival country, as more of a moderate, friendly country. But if this pipeline goes through, Egyptians, would they be in the rival camp, or is it going to harm Israel? I mean, how this is all going to play out?
Right. There are multiple actors involved. Clearly, Iran and Russia involved, and then there is Qatar and China. First, I'll explain Qatar and China because they're silent players.
Yeah.
China had invested about 6.75 billion in Suez Canal somewhere in 2020. The blockade happened in 2021. Then Qatar invested about 5 billion in Egyptian economy. Earlier this year, again, China invested 14.75 billion in Egypt. So that's a lot of money. And if anything happens to Suez Canal, all that money is going down the drain. So without an iota of doubt, these players, these silent players will definitely be impacted by any competitor which takes away Suez Canal's business. Now, let's come to Iran and Russia. Russia is the most sanctioned country in the world today. And Iran fares slightly better than Russia, but it has just, they also have so many sanctions on them that they cannot carry out their trade well. So there's this INSTC, the International North-South Corridor coming up, which will join Russia to Iran via Azerbaijan, Armenia, and then to India. From India, it will be distributed, the oil, the goods will be distributed to other Southeast Asian countries like South Korea and all that. So this corridor is a ray of hope for Iran and Russia. Now, again, IMEC will pretty much utilize, IMEC is the India Middle East corridor. It will utilize Eilat's project as well as the Ben Gurion canal, which is coming up. So IMEC will become a threat to INSTC, and I don't think at this point Iran or Russia will entertain any competition to INSTC.
Well, here you're making a very, very interesting point.
Another
IMAC
country
is a,
is Azerbaijan and Armenia, part of the corridor.
yes, yes. Do you want me to run the other slides also if you would like to explain?
Yeah.
Sure.
So this is the Eilat Canal.
Okay.
Yes. It is parallel to Suez Canal.
Where can you just which one is the Eilat Canal?
The Israel Canal Plan.
Okay, Israel Canal Plan. Okay.
It is connected to Gulf of Aqaba, which opens into Red Sea. The other side of it is Mediterranean Sea.
Okay. I'll go further down. Yes.
Yeah.
This you already mentioned.
Yes.
What's Sumedh pipeline?
Sumedh pipeline. Sumedh pipeline, other than, not a lot of people would have heard about it. Sumedh pipeline is another pipeline which pumps oil from Egypt, from Mediterranean Sea to Red Sea. Again, this it has very limited capacity because these are all old pipelines. This is what I was talking about, Suezmax and VLCC. VLCC can carry, yeah.
Capacities of the different ships. So
Yes.
I think VLCC is the largest one, 330 it's the length, 2 million barrels. And Suezmax
Max has a capacity which is just half of it, 1 million.
Okay. And VLCCs cannot, VLCC and ULCC, they cannot pass through Suez Canal. But can they pass through this Eilat Ashkelon? They can, right?
That is how it is being planned. The
Ben
Canal, when it comes into existence, it will be wide enough and deep enough to let these carriers in.
So that means that this pipeline, Eilat Ashkelon pipeline, has a distinct advantage over the Suez Canal. Definitely. And if IMAC becomes a part of this or IMAC utilizes this, then IMAC has a very superior position, and definitely it's not only going to reduce the distance and time, but also at a much lower price.
Absolutely.
And with much more capacity.
And then it becomes a threat to the INSTC.
INSTC, okay. But interestingly, India is the part of IMAC and ISTCC both, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So how do you look at that?
As far as we are making profit, we should not be objecting to any of it.
Okay.
I mean, that's how it works, right? For any country, if Israel can collaborate with Azerbaijan, which is an Iranian ally, and Azerbaijan is the only country where you will see Israeli flag flying along with Turkish and Pakistani flag. Yes. So
that's a very, very strange marriage.
Yes, absolutely.
Very unlikely and a very strange marriage.
So these are the choke points. So when we start,
yes, I mean, my question, I just so you mentioned about these strategic connectivity projects as important contributors to the global conflicts, not only in the present but also in the past. And we know that there were wars over the Suez Canal and nationalization of the Suez Canal in the past also. So just tell us a bit more about the other choke points in the Middle East. I mean, we have the slide, but I guess you'll have to explain them.
Yes, absolutely. So we also know about I2U2, Israel, India, UAE, America partnership. So again, I2U2 is about these three choke points in Middle East, which is Suez Canal, Bab al-Mandeb, and Strait of Hormuz.
Okay.
So all this is connected. I2U2 is again connected to this pipeline. They're basically going to provide security to this pipeline and the trade which flows through this area.
Which pipeline? This Ashkelon Eilat pipeline?
And because it is part of IMEC, everyone's interest is connected to it. India's, UAE's, Israel's, and America's.
Okay.
So, let's start with Suez Canal. This is a choke point. 12% of the world's trade passes through it. I mean, every year, and about 50 vessels cross this place each day. Then we have Bab al-Mandeb, which is closer to Djibouti. The very reason so many countries have their base in Djibouti is Bab al-Mandeb.
Okay.
Right next to Bab al-Mandeb is a small island called Socotra.
Yeah.
They say that apparently one of the GCC countries and Israel controls that island now because they cannot go to Djibouti and sit with other countries and have a base there. So Bab al-Mandeb, another 47 vessels. Then we have Strait of Hormuz, from which 1/5 of the oil, that flows to different countries passes each day. So these are major choke points. Anything happens here, the trade is disturbed. You remember the Suez Canal blockade, which happened in
Yes.
2021, and the kind of chaos it caused and the delays. It hurts every country which is involved. So
Yes, please.
So I2U2 partnership is about these three choke points: providing security and ensuring that there's ease of trade through these points. And then we have the pipeline, the canal. All this is connected.
And so one more question. Coming to this Eilat Ashkelon pipeline.
What I was saying earlier, remember I mentioned Jerusalem in the beginning?
Yes, yes.
This is one reason. If you look at it, the choke points are concentrated in Middle East.
Yeah.
So this place will forever remain in turmoil.
Okay, well, I'll come to that. No, my next question would be on the future of this conflict. But before that here, so these choke points, as we can see, the three red dots, one at the Suez Canal and the Strait of Hormuz and Bab el-Mandeb. So if this pipeline, Eilat Ashkelon pipeline, comes into effect, then they won't have to go through these choke points, right?
Bab el-Mandeb will still be a choke point.
Okay.
But then again, I said Socotra is controlled by Israeli ally and partially by Israel.
So if this pipeline comes into place, can they bypass these choke points, or I mean, they will partially bypass the choke points, right?
Not Bab el-Mandeb will still exist.
Okay.
But Suez Canal can be avoided. There'll be an alternative to Suez Canal, which will open into Ashkelon. So,
Okay.
there's an alternative. If anything happens in Suez Canal, there's always Ashkelon, or, countries will switch to Ashkelon, Eilat pipeline and the Ben Gurion Canal is what I believe, because it'll be deeper, longer, and then there's pipeline which has better capacity, risk-free. So, yeah.
Perfect.
A lot of trade will happen through that, and lesser. See, again, so using Suez Canal is very expensive. Like each ship has to pay like 300,000 to 400,000 each time it crosses Suez Canal.
And so my next question, like hypothetically, imagine like if they're able to weed out Hamas from Gaza, and if this pipeline comes into full force, can it be instrumental in diffusing tensions between Iran and Israel? I mean, the question here is very fundamental. Is it like economics versus ideology or religious, faith? The question is very fundamental. I mean, will the economics overpower Iran's ideological, religious hatred for Israel, or would Iran continue to be very revengeful and very hateful towards Israel?
As long as the present government remains, or the people with the present, I mean, as long as
the regime you're talking about.
In administration, I don't think Israel and Iran can resolve their issues, because right now Iran's intention is to dominate this corridor.
Okay.
They are not able to send their ships through these corridors. They're not able to access it. So they want control of it. This is exactly why they utilize Gaza in their favor.
But they can, like, if they find some kind of a modus vivendi with Israel and come to some sort of a peace deal with Israel, like the Arabs are coming, they can actually use the corridor. But I mean, you say that the good economics will not be able to offset the bad ideological issues, right?
I believe the Iranian government does not have absolute control over IRGC.
Okay.
This is why there'll be no peace. For example, when a week before UAE was to send its NSA to Iran, drone attacks were carried out by IRGC in UAE last year.
Okay.
Yet UAE and Iran decided to go ahead and resolve their issues and open the embassies. This despite IRGC trying to, it's like Pakistan army trying to disturb relations between Indian government and Pakistani government. So even if Israel is able to resolve its issues with the government, what about IRGC? which gets funded by entities like Qatar, not entities, countries like Qatar, which are very rich. And it's not just about resolving issue with Iran. They'll have to resolve their issue with Qatar. And there's a lot going on. It's like an onion. If you keep peeling, there'll be layer under layer under layer. So there's not one issue which can be resolved in multiple issues. And there are a lot of players like Syria. Everyone is fighting everyone else.
Yeah.
So
Well, it's an interesting area, definitely. And so I come to my last question. What is it that you see in the future? Like, I mean, like today we see that Israel has more or less found a good way to dominate the northern Gaza, and this, even the civilians have been driven to the South Gaza. People are saying that Hamas leaders are also kind of mingling with the civilians in South Gaza. Imagine if they are able to, like, let's say, control South Gaza also. But after that, do you foresee any kind of peace between the Arabs and the Israelis, and some sort of a move towards economic progress using this pipeline, or this conflict is going to escalate? Because we also have players like Iran on one hand, who are like totally against any kind of peace.
right, there were reports that somewhere in 2013, Obama government decided that Israel should help Saudi Arabia and share intel regarding Iran. So the Saudi-Israel relations that you see today, I believe there was a lot happening behind the scenes. So as far as Israel is concerned, it had thawed its relations with GCC long ago, except maybe Qatar. Because when it comes to Qatar, Qatar had serious issues with its own brethren states, Saudi, UAE. In fact, UAE and Qatar had to drag each other to International Court of Justice, and UAE had accused Qatar of sponsoring terrorism on its soil. So I deviated. My point was, as far as Israel is concerned, there is a survival of the fittest happening there. And this is why they would like to have friends, allies in this region. So when it comes with a competitor to Suez Canal, it is irking Egypt, right? But then the Egyptian government is pro-Israel. So I'm sure they'll find a way out to assuage Egypt's, problems regarding this. And Egypt, I'm sure, knows that it'll have to renovate that canal. It itself knows that it has to do it at some point. It's already 150 years old canal. Can you repeat your question, because I missed that point again?
No, my question is very simple. What do you see in the future? Is this conflict going to escalate, or you see some kind of a resumption of the Abraham Accords and that Arab peace process which was happening?
That will happen. I'm sure Abraham's Accord, that is continuing, because there's so much money involved already. People living in the region know how much money has been invested by UAE, Saudi into IMEC. So Abraham's Accord is a part of it. My point is Abraham's Accord, I2U2, IMEC, this pipeline, they're all connected.
Yes.
Right. So and a lot of money has already been invested. So when people say Saudi will pull back its peace negotiations with Israel, doesn't make sense to me, because Saudi has already invested a lot of money, and the only way UAE can connect to Israel on land is through Saudi. This is exactly why IMEC has that rail link between Israel and UAE crossing through Saudi. So when IMECs come in, IMEC is completely activated. Starts functioning in its full capacity. Israel alone will make 400% of profit. So you can imagine the kind of profit other countries involved will make.
Okay.
So why would anyone would like to walk out of it? So when it comes, though I believe this region will forever remain in turmoil because it has multiple choke points. If not Iran, there'll be some other player trying to dominate this corridor. It will have competition. So whether this conflict will escalate, I can already see that along the corridors, Russia, Ukraine, there's there's a conflict happening. Azerbaijan, Armenia, there's a conflict happening. Israel, Hamas, there's a conflict happening. What I mean, even if there is peace, it'll be temporary. I might sound a little pessimistic, but this is the reality. You can see the concentration of choke points in Middle East. One way or the other, maybe in a decade or so, it'll escalate again.
So thank you very much, Levina. We had this very interesting discussion today, and I guess we come to the end of our today's event. And before I end, just a few takeaways. I'm sure it's very difficult to make firm conclusions and precise strategic forecasts about what's happening in the Middle East. But still, but if we go by our esteemed speakers' assessment and analysis, we have a few takeaways. As per Levina, that's definitely this place is going to be in turmoil in the future, but trade and conflict will go parallel to each other, as we see that a lot of these Arab countries like UAE, Saudi, and all these countries have made huge investments in IMAC and U2, I2U2. So definitely they cannot go back on Abraham Accords and all these new strategic connectivity and trade projects that are coming. But at the same time, you have all these choke points in this area. Apart from that, you have all this problem of religious extremism, revivalist extremist terrorist actors backed by terrorist rogue regimes like Iran. So definitely the conflict is going to be an inalienable part of this area. And this is going to unfold in many interesting ways in the future, which we can only see in the future. So at this point, I must say that this is certainly an alarming state of affairs. And as analysts, we can keep guessing and keep making strategic forecasts about this situation. Thank you very much, Levina. Thanks for joining us today. And hopefully we'll come back with another discussion another day on another topic. Thank you.
Good day.
Let me stop the recording.